Hello, my name is Sean, and welcome to Run with Sean. This is my first ever YouTube video, so we'll see how this goes. Just wanted to give a little bit of background about myself and then get into some details about some of the shoes that I've been using over the past few years. I've always been an athlete, but I've never been a runner. I always saw people running and thought, why would you do that? I would run to catch a ball, run to score a goal, but I would never run for the sake of running until about 2019. So 2019, I started running towards the end of the year. I probably ran about 280 miles in 2019. So I was starting out, didn't really know what I was doing. I bought my first pair of running shoes, and when I bought my first pair of running shoes, I basically was just looking for something that was cheap that I could get and use. So I ended up getting a pair of Reeboks float rides at a discounted price and gave those a shot. Every time I went out to run, I ran basically as hard as I could. I wasn't pacing myself. I wasn't building any kind of base. I was just running hard and sweating a lot and getting tired. So that's not the best recipe for building endurance and running longer. But I kind of continued to put in the miles, and then I started paying attention to actual coaching and things that you should do and looking at YouTube videos about running and learning what I should be doing. So I ended up doing a lot more easy runs and kind of mixing up my training. And once I started doing that, I learned that there's different shoes for different reasons. There's a different shoe you want to use for an everyday easy run versus a long run, tempo run, and then most importantly for races. I often equate that to cars. You take one car to Costco to pick up the groceries. That's not the same car you take to a racetrack. So people that are lucky enough to have that extra car in the garage that they take out just on the weekends, that's the race car. That's the racing shoe. But you don't bring your race car to Costco. So you need a couple different shoes in your running lineup to complement the type of work that you're doing. So I started in 2019. I ran about 280 miles that year. I was just kind of getting into it. In 2020, I ran 740 miles, so I about doubled my mileage from the year prior. That was obviously during COVID, so there was no races for me to do, so I was really upping my mileage, but there was no races. I did a couple virtual races, where you just submit your results online and see how you do against the other people running the race. I ran my first half marathon in 2020. I did that virtually, and I was shooting for 8-minute mile pace. I ended up running it in about 1:42. So not bad for my first go, but later that year I ran a half marathon in 1:31:21, so I cut that down close to 1:30. So that was one of my really big goals for 2021, was to run a half marathon in under an hour and 30 minutes. So 2021, I doubled my training again. I went from 740 miles to about 1,400 miles. So that was a big jump, where I was running a lot more, building endurance, needing a lot more shoes, watching a lot more YouTube channels with people talking about shoes, and purchasing a lot more shoes. I was actually able to get under an hour 30 for the half marathon in 2021, and 2021 was the first time that I attempted a marathon. I actually live in New York. I wanted to run the New York City Marathon, and they had an option in 2021 where you could run a marathon virtually during marathon week and get an automatic entry for the real marathon this year in 2022. So this will be my first official marathon. It'll be the New York City Marathon I'll be running this year. So I'm in the midst of marathon training for that. Just had a 10K race today, the Great Cow Harbor 10K, which is the first race I ever did in 2021. So I went back this year, did a much better job pacing, and shaved about 1:20 off my time. So I was happy with that. Ended up just over 42 minutes. So that was good for me. So happy with that. So far this year, I've run about 1,200 miles. So I'm definitely going to be running more than I did in 2021. So I've kind of been building up over time. So that's a little bit about my background and how much running I've been doing. Right now, my fastest mile is around 5:37. I've done a 5K in about 18:40, so I'm looking to get under 18 minutes for a 5K. For a 10K, my best is around 40 minutes. So I can get into the 6 to 6:30 pace for the shorter distance races. My best half marathon was 1:29:44 so far. So about 6:51, a little less than that pace. My big goal for this year is when I run the New York City Marathon, I want to try and qualify for Boston. I turned 40 this year, so the qualifying time for me is 3 hours and 10 minutes. So that would be a 7:15 pace. So that's what I'm shooting for in Boston. But then luckily I saw that B goal is Chicago has a qualifying time for my age of 3 hours and 20 minutes. So I got an extra 10 minutes in there. If I can't make Boston, hopefully I'll be running Chicago and qualify for Boston and Chicago. So that's my big goal for now. So now I just wanted to get a little bit into some of the shoes that kind of started me on this. Once I started running in the Reeboks, I got a pair of Saucony Triumphs, and those were a more cushioned shoe, but a very heavy shoe, very durable, a lot of grip, but really not fast. So then I kind of went over to Hoka's. I tried the Hoka Clifton. I had the Hoka Carbon X, the first Carbon X, which was where I was setting some of my fastest times at that time. That is a very stiff shoe though, not soft at all by today's standards, what the super shoes are like. So it was very light, very stiff, has a nice rocker, so that really, I could turn up the pace in that, but it wasn't a super comfortable shoe to run long miles in. So the one that kind of changed everything for me was this guy, the Saucony Endorphin Speed. So this is the Speed 1. Right now they're up to the Speed 3. I still have my Speed 1, and this has been a very durable shoe. This one itself right now I have about 220 miles on, and other than being dirty, it looks almost as good as new. The tread is almost not worn at all. They still have spring in them. This is a flexible shoe. It doesn't have a carbon plate in it. It has a nylon plate. So it really is a little bit more forgiving than some of those carbon plated options. So with the rocker, the Saucony Speed Roll technology, it helps you kind of get up on your toes and roll through your stride, making it really a propulsive shoe, but a very comfortable shoe. There's a little bit more padding in the collar than some of the race shoes out there. So this shoe, I put a lot of miles in and really enjoyed it. Ended up getting it in another colorway. I went with the Vizzy. If you see behind me, I got some bright shoes here. I like the bright colorways. So these are the Vizzy of the Endorphin Speed, the original. This was the shoe that I first ran a sub 130 half marathon in. The interesting thing about that was it wasn't even I wasn't trying to do it that day. I took this shoe out of the box. I knew how much I liked it, and just went out for a run. I'm like, all right, I'll do a bit of a tempo run today. So I ran 3 miles. I was doing sub 7-minute pace, felt good. So I did 6 miles and was continuing with that pace. Still felt good. Ended up getting to 10 miles, and I was like, wow, I'm actually, if I keep this going at this pace, I could break 130 for a half marathon. So what was crazy about that was the first time I went out for a run trying to do that half marathon, I trained for it. I had my carbon plated shoe, I had my energy gels, I had water, I was prepared, and I ran a 142. This day I went out there not even trying, and this shoe just felt so good, rolling through my stride. I was able to do it in under an hour and 30 minutes. So this shoe was kind of a revelation to me that a shoe can really make a difference with that bouncy foam, the PIBA-based foam. The Saucony foam is definitely firmer than Nike and New Balance Fuel Cell, but it's very responsive, nice bounce, and combined with that nylon plate, the flexibility of this shoe really is a great shoe. This one I have about 222 miles on, so about the same as the first one, and again, almost no wear. So it's funny because I want to replace these shoes, but they just keep going. So, I'll keep using them. Since then, there's been the Speed 2. Now they have the Speed 3. Very little change from the 1 to the 2. Maybe I'll get the 3 at the end of this year once I'm done with these ones. It'll be nice if those go on sale and I can pick up a pair of those. So one thing I wanted to do too is I have my little scale over here. So I'm just going to weigh. In normal shoes, I'm a size 12. A lot of times in running shoes, I'll end up going for a 12 and a half. I like having a little bit more room in the toe box there. Want to have about, a thumbnail's length of space between your toe and the front of the shoe, so you're not crunched up against the shoe. So these are 12 and a half. So in my size, a 12 and a half, the Endorphin Speed is coming in at 9.08 ounces. So under 10 ounces in a 12 and a half. So after running in the Endorphin Speed, I was like, I gotta go for the Endorphin Pro. So this is the carbon plated version of the Endorphin Speed. It's a little bit less of an upper, a little bit more of a stripped down upper. The tongue is very thin as opposed to the Speed, which has a full tongue. The Speed also has more of a built up heel counter. It has a plastic piece there. Doesn't really bend as much, so a bit more locked in the heel. Whereas the Pro doesn't have that heel counter in there, so this is a floppy kind of heel. But it actually ends up working out for me. My heel can kind of tuck in there a little bit better, and I actually feel that these fit my foot a little bit more snug. The tongue is almost more like sock-like construction there. It's not really a booty construction, but it kind of hugs your foot and doesn't really go anywhere. This one, let's see. I have about 128 miles on this one. And again, I found that outsole on the Saucony shoes to be incredibly durable. So it's dirty, but that's about it. I mean, these shoes are as good as new. One big difference between the Speed and the Pro, this has the carbon fiber plate in it as opposed to the nylon plastic plate, and they are much, much stiffer. This is a very stiff shoe. So you really need to be, a big runner, a heavy runner, a powerful runner, someone with a strong foot strike to really get the best from this. I'm about 6'4". I'm over 220 pounds, so I'm kind of on the large side for a distance runner. So I can get some benefit from this shoe. I ran a nice 10K in this shoe, but it's so firm that going beyond 10 miles, I feel like it's really not the best shoe out there. So this is one that I liked it, but it was very firm. And, a lot of people ended up preferring the Endorphin Speed to the Endorphin Pro. So even though the shoe's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit more expensive, it has that carbon fiber plate, this one's coming in at 9.21 ounces in my size 12.5. So it's slightly lighter than the Speed, but a lot of people to this day prefer the Speed 1 and the Speed 2 to the Pro 1 and the Pro 2. Very little difference between those models from year to year. So it's still a very good shoe, a fast shoe, a light shoe, but very firm. So it has its place. I use these now more for like tempo runs. If I'm doing some repeats, less than 7 miles, it feels really good for those. It helps you get up on your toes and go fast, but it really doesn't have the cushioning for those longer races. So that was something when I started running half marathons, I was thinking, all right, I need something with a little bit more cushion to do the job. Also, the Saucony shoes are on the narrow side. They're narrow in the midfoot, narrow in the heel, not as narrow as Nike shoes, but definitely on the narrower side. So I was looking for something to fit the bill and came across the New Balance RC Elite V2s. These by far have the softest foam of any running shoe I've ever tried. These ones, if you press in on it, you can actually see it really compresses a lot. These also have a carbon plate, but they're much more flexible than the Endorphin Pros. So you got that big sidewall of foam there. Your foot kind of sits down in it a little bit, so that's not the full drop of the shoe. But these ones have a lot more foam in the forefoot, which I really like. The upper is very thin, very breathable, a lot of holes in there. And it still has kind of a built-up heel collar. This one's actually a more firm heel collar than the Saucony, so it does lock in your heel really nicely. What I found with this shoe, though, is it's very, very comfortable for long runs. Also, you have that cutout in the bottom. You see the carbon plate. This one, I have about 160 miles in right now. You can see the forefoot rubber has started to wear down a little bit. A little of the tread is worn, which you would expect. A little bit of superficial damage to the midsole there, but the strips are doing a good job of protecting it. I've actually found this shoe, for me, too soft to run fast in. So it's very comfortable, but it's the flex of it makes it very comfortable. The squish of it makes it very comfortable, but I can't run a half marathon or a marathon in this shoe and try and go all out pace. It's just not working for me because it's a little bit heavier, and just the sink in feels really comfortable, but I feel like you're squishing into the shoe too much and it's really not giving you that pop. I don't really feel that this shoe has a carbon fiber plate in it. So it's a fast shoe, it's a very comfortable shoe, but I've ended up using this more for long mileage, 10 mile plus runs. This is a super comfortable shoe to run, marathon pace or tempo runs in where you're running long distances. So I really enjoy this shoe, but it's just not a race shoe to me. This one is coming in at 9.52 ounces in my size, 12 and a half. So basically, I was still on the quest for, what's going to be the best racing shoe. So this one, very firm, very snappy, has the pop, but very, because it's so firm, kind of unforgiving for those longer miles. Then this one kind of went the other direction, where it's very soft, very forgiving, very comfortable, but didn't really have that pop that the Saucony Endorphin Pro does. So this one, again, I really enjoy it for those long miles, those easier paces, but it just doesn't scream race to me. So I was avoiding Nikes because I know how narrow they run and the instability of those shoes. So that brought me to Asics when they came out with the Metaspeed Sky. So prior to the Vaporfly behind me here, this was my favorite shoe that I had ever tried. It has a very, very thin upper. You can basically see right through that upper. You can see my finger there. But this is another shoe. It's incredibly stiff. This is probably the stiffest shoe of any of the ones that I have. The foam, though, has more squish than the Saucony foam does. So this was a good combination of a little bit softer foam, a nice pop from that carbon plate. Asics also has excellent grip. This rubber, the Asics rubber, is very grippy. Feels good on wet as well as dry. One thing here, I do have some damage to that exposed foam on the heel. A lot of people have reported that, especially if someone's a heel striker. I really go more mid-foot to forefoot, but just the way that they don't extend that back all the way, you get a lot of tearing on the midsole there. So it's not really doing much damage to the shoe, but something to keep in mind from a durability standpoint. This shoe I have, I think about 60 miles in it, and I wore this. This year I did the New York City United Airlines half marathon from Brooklyn to Central Park, and I went with this shoe. And unfortunately, one of the things with this, it comes up very high in the Achilles, and it is a little bit stiff around the top there. It is a flexible heel, but it comes up very high in the Achilles. I ended up getting a really bad blister on my Achilles on my right foot, and on my left foot, I was having pain in my heel about halfway through the race. I was kind of sinking down too much into the heel, and it was rubbing me on the right side. On my right foot. So this one, after I ran that race, I was like, all right, this is not it. So it was kind of in between those two, where it had a little bit more softness than the Saucony and a little bit more speed and lightness than the New Balance, but ultimately still was not the right shoe for me. This one weighs in at 8.57 ounces, so it's also a very light shoe. So I really enjoyed running in the Asics. I'm probably going to take this out a few more times and use it for some speed sessions, some shorter runs, but I'm definitely not going to take this for a half marathon or a marathon distance. I kind of beat up my feet too much with the fit of that. So after all that, I finally went to Nike. So this is the Nike Vaporfly Next % 2. I ended up getting it in a white colorway, the white and pink colorway. For sale. They had it at a Dick's outlet store for $140, and I had a $10 credit as well, so it ended up costing me $130 for a pair of Vaporflies. So I was like, I got to give these a shot, at that price point, when they're normally $250. So I ended up getting them in a size 13, which is about a half size bigger than I usually go for, but they didn't have a 12 and a half. So at the price, I'm like, I'll give them a shot. And the first time I took them out and ran a 5K, I set a personal best. So I was like, wow, I can see what the hype is about with the Vaporflies. Nike definitely has the best foam of any of the major running brands. This is the Zoom X foam in the Vaporfly. This is kind of the Goldilocks of foams for me. It's just right. You can see there, it does definitely compress. It's nowhere near as soft as the New Balance, but it's much softer and bouncier than the Asics. So this was kind of a perfect combination. With the Vaporfly, you have the offset lacing to keep the pressure off the top of your foot, that thin tongue, very minimal heel. They put the padding around the inside of the heel. Heel counter is flexible. It is narrow though. This one in the midfoot, you can see nice rubber coverage in the front, but you can see how narrow that gets in the midfoot, and then they have the 2 strips of rubber there for padding. This shoe I've been using just for racing this year. I got this one a couple months ago. After I had the white one, I ended up getting this color in a 12.5, so this is my true size. And I got about 28 miles on this shoe so far. So it's a little bit dirty. Did some races this summer where I was running on dirt, but the grip is fine on dirt as well. One thing that I note here is, as a midfoot striker to forefoot striker, that's really what this shoe is best for. Since that heel is so narrow, if someone's a heel striker, it's definitely unstable. So I have found this to be the fastest shoe, the best shoe that I've tried so far. So I've set, personal bests in my 5K in this shoe. I took this out today. I ran the Cow Harbor race in Northport on Long Island. I did it in just over 42 minutes, so that was about 6:40 something pace, I think. So that's what I was shooting for. I wanted to do it around 7-minute mile pace the first few miles and go a little faster at the back end. So this worked great for me today. But one thing someone that I noticed with actually said to me was, you might want to look at getting a new pair of shoes. It looked like your shoe was collapsing a lot while you were running. And that's something I do overpronate a little bit with my right foot. Not in my left at all, but in my right foot I have a little bit of overpronation. And that's something where the Nike shoes really don't excel, being that narrow in the midfoot, and they do have that pronation. So to me, the Vaporfly is still the fastest shoe I've ever run in. It's my favorite racing shoe. The only negative is that overpronation. But after having this, I really wanted to try, and we got to do the weight on this one as well. So this comes in at 8.61, and I think the Metaspeed Sky was 8.54. So this is actually the lightest shoe. It's actually lighter than the Vaporfly in my size, but very close. So these two are definitely the lightest of the bunch. But after I was so impressed with the Vaporfly, I really wanted to give the Alphafly a shot. I was able to get this one on sale as well. The biggest difference here being those AirPods. So this one has the carbon plate as well. More coverage in the back. Do have a little bit of wear in the back there. This shoe I've got just over 50 miles on, 54 miles on this shoe so far. It definitely is stiff, again, very stiff with that carbon plate. This has a booty construction where there's no tongue. It's one piece. So these are difficult to get on. You have to really use both pull tabs and pull your foot in there. Very high stack of Zoom X in the back here. These are actually a low drop though. It's a 4mm drop. To me, these actually are like a negative drop, because when you're standing there, it seems like you kind of lean back. This is the weirdest shoe to wear if you're just standing there trying to walk, because it really wants you to be up on your toes. They want you to land on your midfoot, compress those AirPods, and move and roll forward. So this, I feel like, really demands you to run on your toes. If you run on your heels, you have that padding there, but you're really not benefiting as much from the AirPods that way. But this one, the biggest problem is it's the narrowest shoe I've ever seen in the midfoot. So you really have a lot of space where your foot hangs over the side of the shoe. So if you overpronate, this shoe is terrible for that. So I wore these on a longer run, and I was really rolling that ankle, and I had some pain for a couple days. So again, this is a shoe that I'm kind of going to use sparingly. I'm not going to use it for those longer runs. To me, it's the most efficient shoe ever made. It really makes it easy to run fast. You're rolling through your stride. It feels great, when you get up to a pace and just hold the pace. The shoe really helps you to maintain that pace. But to me, it's just too unstable to take for the marathon distance. So for me, and then this is also the heaviest of all these shoes, I believe. This one in a 12.5 is 9.96 ounces, so almost 10 ounces. So having all that extra stack height, the AirPods as well, makes this the heaviest shoe. So for me, the leader in the clubhouse right now is the Nike Vaporfly. This is my favorite running shoe that I've ever tried. It really has that special feeling on race day, gets you up on your toes, nice and bouncy, fast. It's stiff, but it's got that bounce. To me, there's really nothing like this. I've seen a lot of reviews recently for the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 and how that is, closer to the Vaporfly now. I just ordered a pair of those, so I'm hoping those are going to work out for me, and it'll probably be between that shoe and this one for what I run the New York City Marathon in. But I'm finding, with that overpronation, over the course of 26.2 miles, the New Balance being a little bit, or the Saucony being a little bit of a wider platform, I think is really going to help me out. So that also, they've supposed to have softened the foam compound from the Pro 1 and 2, so it's going to feel a little bit more like the Speed. So I'm looking forward to giving that one a shot. But that's a little bit of a quick run through of some of my thoughts on some of these carbon plate shoes. I probably will go back and do a full review of each shoe, but just wanted to kind of give a little bit of insight into my history and some of the shoes that I've tried so far. One that I'm really enjoying is the Nike Invincible Run. That to me is my favorite easy day shoe that I'm really putting a lot of miles on in marathon training now. I've had that for about 2 months, and I've got about 82 miles on that shoe. So I've been putting a lot of miles on the Invincible Run. So just wanted to give a little bit of insight into myself. I'm hoping to use this channel to give my thoughts on running shoes, help people make good decisions in which shoes they want to try out, what might be best for them. And give some tips on training and the gear that I'm using, and hopefully spread this the joy of running. So for me, I'll talk a little bit about that too. Again, I never thought I'd be a runner, but once I got into it, getting that runner's high, getting out there, putting in the miles, for me it's me time. It's a time when I can reflect, think about work, think about anything but work, think about the song that's playing, think about my cadence, my pace. It's interesting the things your mind does out on a long run. But to me, it's just, I always feel refreshed, coming back from that run. And now that I've, been at it for a couple years, I've done some races, I've learned a lot, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. So I'm going to keep doing it and hope you will keep doing it with me. Thanks, everybody.